I've covered about 700 miles in the 6 weeks I've had my Suzuki V-Strom 800DE, and while I think it's generally very good at what it does, the stock exhaust is pretty ugly and a little bit quiet for my taste, so I've bought the SE Project Rally Raid titanium exhaust to spice things up a little bit. Now if you're just here for the sound, there are timestamps along the bottom of the video, and quite simply with the baffle in, it sounds more or less identical to the stock exhaust, but with the baffle out you get a little bit more volume and bark. But for the rest of you, I'll also tell you why I chose this particular exhaust, I'll show you the weight difference and the process of removing the baffle and fitting the exhaust, and I'll tell you how I got on with it on a 300-mile trip. Now there are plenty of options in terms of end cans for the V-Strom. The first batch I looked at were the longer adventure touring style cans from the likes of Yoshimura, MIV, Fuel, SE Project and so on. They all look fine to me and much better than stock, and of course looks are completely subjective, so you may think the opposite to this, but I personally think they suit the RE version of this bike better, so I looked at the rally style options instead, of which there are two that I'm aware of. The Arrow Indie Race looks okay, but the heat shield doesn't do a very good job of covering the link pipe, and I think the exhaust looks quite short, which to me looks a little unusual on the bike. Whereas the SC Project Rally Raid is the perfect length to my eye. It's titanium coloured, which I really like. It has a nicer matte carbon heat shield, and it still has the Dakar look that suits the off-road aesthetics of the bike, even if I'll spend 99% of my time on tarmac. It also claims to be 700 grams lighter than the other SE Project cans, and it's significantly cheaper. And this is my third SE Project exhaust, and I've always found them to be really high quality, so they're one of the first brands I look for. In terms of delivery, the website said it would take 3 to 15 days to arrive, but in classic Italian exhaust manufacturer style, it arrived in the UK after 30 working days. It cost me £461 direct from SE Project, and I was pleasantly surprised that I didn't get charged any import duties or taxes. Now before I installed it, I wanted to replace the baffle rivet with a bolt so I can remove or insert the baffle much more easily. Now having tried this exhaust with both the baffle in and out, I'll almost certainly ride with the baffle out most of the time, but it's great to have the option to reinsert it if I end up doing trips around Europe, where some countries have stricter noise regulations. The end of the rivet is about 6mm away from the baffle, so I wedged in a piece of plastic to protect the baffle from any overzealous drilling. But I used the wrong size drill bit, and I managed to break first a 3mm drill bit, followed by a 3.5mm drill bit. And because I was pushing harder than I should have, the second drill bit went straight through the plastic stop and clean through the baffle. Fortunately, it just pierced a small hole in the baffle, so no major damage. I then switched to a 6mm drill bit and applied less force, which did the job much better. And if I started again, I'd use a 6mm bit and just take 5 minutes to gently drill the rivet out. But really, as long as you go slow and don't apply too much force, you should be able to do a much cleaner job than I did. The baffle is seated with a tight friction fit, so I applied a generous spraying of WD-40, wiggled it around a bit, applied more WD-40, then pulled it out. You do need to grip the pliers fairly hard, but I could feel the baffle wanting to move, so I was as gentle as possible, and I managed to avoid damaging the baffle even with these thick pliers. And whilst I was there, I put the baffle on the scales and it came in at 272 grams or half a pound. Now installing the can was pretty easy. You'll need 6 and 4mm Allen keys and 10 and 13mm sockets or spanners, plus some isopropyl alcohol and a microfiber cloth to remove fingerprints. The stock heat shields come off with the 4mm Allen key and on very tight. We're talking finger tight, not hand tight here. The mounting bracket bolt is much stiffer though. It needs the 6mm Allen key, and you should leave the bolt in loose while you undo the bolt on the link pipe so the exhaust pipe doesn't have to take the weight of the end can while you undo the retaining clip, and I didn't do that. The retaining clip bolt is also very tight and needs a 6mm Allen key too, but the nut is part of the clip, so you don't need a spanner or socket on the rear side. The exhaust then slides off easily enough, or at least mine did, partly I'm sure because the bike is pretty much new. The SE Project can comes with its own clip and a new gasket. There's a stop at the tip of the stock link pipe that holds the gasket in place, and mine lined up pretty easily. You don't reuse the stock bolts here, and instead you use the new bolts that came with the SE Project exhaust to mount the can to the hanger. The bolt again needs a 6mm Allen key, and the nut on the back takes the 13mm spanner or socket. Now I didn't look up torque specs, which I'm sure I should have done, but instead I just went for hand tight on the mounting hanger, then I tightened the new retaining clip with a 10mm socket, again hand tight. You need to remove the rubber spacer at the rear of the stock link pipe and insert the bolt clip that comes with the exhaust. Then you reuse both of the stock heat shield bolts to fit the fancy new carbon shield. I can tell you from personal experience that carbon fibre cracks very easily if you over tighten bolts, and this didn't come with any rubber washers, so finger tight will suffice. I then applied a generous helping of rubbing alcohol to clean the exhaust, because I'm told fingerprints will burn into the surface if you're not too careful, so this step is well worth doing no matter how clean the can looks. As to the weight difference, the stock can weighs 4.8 kilos or 10.5 pounds in freedom units, and the SC Project can weighs 1.9 kilos or 4.2 pounds without the 300 gram baffle, so the new can is roughly 3 kilos or 6 pounds lighter than stock, which to be honest won't make much difference, but this is a really heavy bike, so I'll take any weight savings I can get. So that's the install, weight and aesthetics, but how does it sound? Well, we'll start with a couple of clips, then I'll describe how I found it in the first few hundred miles. Now, as I said at the start, with the baffle in, I can't tell any difference between the SC Project and the stock can. Listening back to the video clips with headphones in, the SC Project does sound a tiny bit better, but I don't notice any difference when I'm riding, and it sounds the same to me when I'm on the move. Now, that will be a good thing for some people and a bad thing for others, but for me, if I wasn't able to remove the baffle, this exhaust would have been disappointing. It looks great and the weight saving is of course welcome, but the main reason I got it was the extra bark, so I will definitely be riding sans baffle most of the time. And with the baffle out, it gives a nice gruff sound when you blip the throttle and under hard acceleration. Because this is not a full system and therefore doesn't remove the main catalytic converter, it still does sound a little bit muffled, and I bet this bike would sound fantastic with a proper decal link pipe, but it's important for me to be able to quickly make it quiet when I need it to be, so that's not on the cards for this bike. And for me, with the baffle out, it's the right compromise of extra bark and bass without too much extra volume on a touring bike. I did hear 2 or 3 pops and bangs on my long journey, but it doesn't really do that 99% of the time, and really what you're getting is a deeper, bassier tone and a few extra decibels of volume. Now, on the subject of volume, you can definitely hear a bit of a drone on the motorway, and I can no longer hear the tyre noise that I used to be able to because it's now drowned out by the exhaust noise. That didn't bother me on my 300 mile round trip, but it might do if I was doing long stints on the motorway at a constant speed. Although, to be honest, the lack of cruise control on this bike would bother me a lot more, and I'll just take the baffle with me on any tours so I can pop it in quickly if I need to. Ultimately then, I'm really happy with it, and it's more or less exactly what I hoped it would be. Nice and light, looks cool, and releases a bit more of that lovely twin cylinder sound. Now, I hope this video has been useful if you're considering this exhaust, and if you want more updates on the V-Strom as well as more general biking content, make sure you like and subscribe, and until next time, ride safe.